Please welcome Managing Director, First Beverage Ventures, Kristen Bareuther.
Good morning, everyone. Or I should say afternoon, actually, looking at this crowd. Having worked at a distributor organization covering multiple states, I have an appreciation for both the incredible value of data one has at their fingertips, as well as the challenge of both harnessing that data in a meaningful way to really impact sales, and also sharing that data with suppliers and customers to really help them build their respective businesses. In my new life in private equity, within the beverage alcohol space, I've seen a rapid growth of new-to-market technologies, which is what makes this panel so exciting. If we think about it across industries, you hear a lot about taming big data and how to get useful behavior insights. But apparently, people think of big data and say, well, big data is really for big businesses. Now, however, we're seeing how technology is becoming an equalizer of sorts. New apps and softwares allow smaller companies to gather and analyze data like bigger companies, enabling them to really compete like the big guys. We'll talk with some of those tech companies today as part of this panel, serving both large and small companies, to dive into how smaller companies can use technology to really beat the competition. And with that said, I'd love to introduce today's panelists. First, Craig Letton, who is the CEO of MRM, which is Managed Response Marketing. MRM's innovative software helps businesses to increase sales and reduce inefficiency in their marketing programs. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you.
Secondly, Andre Preoteasa, founder of Drinks Technology, an IT service company focused exclusively on the IT needs within the beverage alcohol industry. Matt Talbot, CEO and co-founder of GoSpotCheck, which we all have apparently around our necks, a mobile field execution management solution that enables reps to easily capture data at accounts. Jim Thompson, co-founder and product evangelist, Grapevines, which is a CRM that lays on top of Salesforce, providing field-level data, execution objectives, and business insights.
Could be better.
And lastly, Sherman, co-founder and CEO of SevenFifty, an online communications platform for the three-tier system in which wholesalers and retailers communicate via a centralized online marketplace, and where detailed wholesaler product catalog and pricing information is available to all tiers. Welcome, gentlemen. Before we dive into tech tools available to supplier companies, let's talk a bit about why this is happening. What's different now than, let's say, 5 years ago in the industry? And I'll leave it open for each of you.
I don't mind jumping in on this one. I think what we've encountered, and the thing that enables our businesses to run, is the proliferation of software as a service and the ability to host infrastructure in the cloud and outsource most of the typical functions that would require people to work internally in the business. So anything from tools for marketing automation, CRM, accounting, none of these functions any longer are required internally, and they can be produced at much, much lower costs by utilizing cloud technology and third-party developers.
I think, also with what's happening in the world generally, people have a lot higher expectations about data. If you can log into Facebook at any time and see what all your friends are up to, or you can log into Twitter and get a pulse of what's happening in the world, I think everyone's looking to take those same experiences to their business, right? So data is expected now, and it's part of the game. And it's expected that it's as easy to access as it is in your everyday life, in your working life.
Right?
Yeah, I'd add to that I think the drive to collect data is bigger than ever before. And there's been discussions with distributors for probably a decade where they weren't sure where, all of this data collection, everything outside of the order, it's a term that we use a lot. Where does that fit in our sales model and our overall corporate strategy? And that's changed a lot in 5 years. I'd say, cloud and SaaS, thankfully have been around a long time and have become very mature. We technically don't have conversations around cloud storage, security issues, stuff like that. Now it's more about strategy. What do we do with it? So,
Yeah, I'd build on those points by saying there's been a big focus on user interface and user design. Everyone's using Facebook and Twitter and Google, which are beautifully designed pieces of software that look incredibly simple, but there's a massive amount of work gone into that to make it look simple and make it operational for a user that doesn't have a great deal of technical ability. And I think we're now seeing that come into business-to-business applications. Because people have high expectations of software based in their personal lives, they now expect to see that in their business lives.
I think these guys hit it on the head with a lot of cloud technologies. There was also the emergence of new stuff like virtual reality, artificial intelligence, really, really, really big data. You know, we're in this industry where data is pretty big, but you think of, you know, airline companies that are looking at all sorts of data, or hedge funds, and all these technologies have really come up. They're still nowhere near mature with virtual reality. Any of the marketers in this room have probably already heard of this and are thinking of ways to capitalize on it.
Really interesting. Let's discuss what's available to companies. I know you all provide various types of technology solutions for businesses, but what general needs for any size company do you see in the marketplace now that it's interesting and that tech helps solve?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got a slightly different perspective because, as you probably tell my accent, I'm from Scotland, and we work largely in Europe and in the UK at the moment, and it's quite a very advanced market within Europe. And what we've seen a big surge in is e-commerce, particularly for wholesalers using e-commerce as a B2B function. So salespeople are no longer order takers.
Right.
It's all really done either via telesales or online, and we're seeing about some wholesalers are taking 50% of their orders via their e-commerce websites. So that's had a really big knock-on impact on the role of the salesperson and the sort of relationship there. And subsequently, new technology has come out to support those salespeople to do the added value services like marketing support, business support, and very consultative selling skills. And that's where we've been working in.
Very interesting.
I think there's a huge theme around, and this is something I'm sure Aaron could probably speak to even better than I could, so maybe I should let him talk, but data harmonization, I think, is just one of the absolute musts for any company right now. I mean, the kind of times of data living in disparate systems, not staying harmonized with other data sets, creates a huge drag in being able to take action on whatever intelligence you're gathering. And so we certainly encourage any customer to think pretty deeply about their data strategy and how to think about how they can make the various data sets that they're working with to run their business work together more fluidly. In a way where it's always accessible, it's consistent, they know it's going to scale as they continue to add to that data set.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I think I think that as Kristen was kind of touching on, data exists now, and it's robust in terms of the different sources where it's coming from, and the ability to really harmonize all of it and be able to take action on top of it is a central theme, I think, for many of us are really working on here. And so being able to think about what tools are available that let me utilize the information that I have available and put it into practice quickly and efficiently for my team seems to be a common thread.
I think you're seeing more of a breakdown of the silos of data. Something that excites me operationally with the way a lot of us run our companies is the ability to take our productivity systems, our sales systems, our marketing systems, and now what used to be months of work, bringing all this data together is like point and click. I go into Slack now. I don't know if any of your teams are using it, but one click, it's linked to Salesforce. One click, linked to Google Drive. One click, linked to my calendar. We're not yet there on ERP systems and depletion data, but that seems to be the trend. I mean, the heavy lifting around bringing data together, people are building amazing tools to automate that. And so we're trying to stay on top of that. We're a very heavy data-driven business, as are all these guys. So there are great tools that are getting cheaper, easier to use, and you can move things around to cheaper public clouds like Amazon. So that's pretty exciting.
Very exciting.
So I'm in a unique perspective because my company doesn't make apps, so we provide IT. So we get to see how all this stuff sits on this very thin layer of IT. And when we talk about data, there's all this underlying stuff. Now, most stuff's in the cloud. The cloud's this kind of nebulous term. But when you have the data on site, it's sitting there and it's just managing, cranking out a lot of stuff. And it's interesting how we're talking about data. And I'd love to be able to hear if we have a Q&A what you guys think about data to kind of sharpen our minds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to me just in terms of what your company does too, in terms of being able to remotely provide IT services in a way that I think traditional companies never thought about it. So that aspect and that ease, I think, is incredible.
So this is where I can pitch my company, right?
No.
I have brochures for everybody.
No, go ahead. Anyway, I think we should switch gears though too. Everyone wants to sell cases, either on and off premise or both, I'll call it. It's well known that what sells cases are some combination of relationships, marketing innovation, and sales execution. These factors can be really challenging for some of those smaller companies who may not have the human resources in terms of sales and marketing teams, which I think is a unique opportunity for how technology might be able to help in those areas. What I think would be worthwhile is for us to really talk a little bit about marketing and then separately talk about some of the sales execution pieces. So when you look at marketing first, what technology do you see that helps suppliers and wholesalers market their brands more effectively today?
I'd like to kick it off where it's anything that you can get the marketing vision projected onto the sales team. Because I came from a spirits company, and the marketers were all in-house on the 50th floor of a big building, and the sales team was anywhere but there. They were out there. And what I used to say is every salesperson has a little marketer inside, so they would tweak the marketing material. And every marketer certainly has a salesperson inside. So anything that gets the marketing vision projected onto sales, and vice versa, to get the sales input back to marketing. And a lot of technologies do this. This is probably one of the things that we're all thinking about is, if you're dealing with numbers or you're dealing with, talking to your team or getting feedback back. It's any kind of technology that just makes it faster, easier, better. People are getting older, so you're getting people that are doing things differently, and they need to compete with other people, other companies. Because at the end of the day, all these suppliers are doing the same thing. They're selling cases. I mean, no one's really doing anything differently than that.
I think I'll start off by plugging Aaron's company. I'm fascinated that, in this day and age, I could become a distributorship tomorrow, have no salespeople, although I know a bit about how salespeople should go to market, but, enable a whole marketplace to get products from me and service those products without necessarily having people taking orders on the market. I think that's fascinating, so great job. But also I'll say that from our perspective, technology is enabling people to sell the right products to the right accounts. It's a big part of our philosophy. It's driven by segmentation. It's driven by some of the things that are happening through partner data and agencies that are collecting market level data on what is the right account, where do we have sustainable volume. That's a term that we're really trying to adopt. So it's less about, I'm going to shove this theoretical pallet full of cases out into the market and then have to do that every quarter or every month. It's more about what are we doing to build to activate the brands to pull that in, where we know that the tastemakers and the brand influencers are. So we're getting to them, we're building relationships with them, making sure we're tracking everything that we know about them, so that way they're pulling the product into market, right? So we can focus our energies elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah, I think that looking at communications as a piece of marketing and looking at how we're removing barriers to communication, it's certainly something that we think a lot about. Though we have an e-commerce component, we do also engage the sales reps and try and keep them very, very central to the process. But actually, I'm going to plug Craig's company now. Being able to create visual assets that also help tell the story and better get the message of your brand in front of the customer in a way that's compelling, that's something that for small teams is an extraordinary amount of cost and overhead to manage a team internally, and being able to outsource all of that with technology is incredibly valuable.
Are there any examples of people that you're seeing that are doing that really exceptionally today in terms of people marketing their products? Do you all have any case studies or thoughts on specific companies that you've seen?
Yeah, we did a project with Carlsberg, big beer company, but they also a wholesaler in the UK, and they spotted a gap in the market for social media posts. So what they were finding is that bars and restaurants and off-premise outlets were using social media as their primary source of marketing. But there was no tool that allowed them to do that. So they were creating their own posts with tons of text, spelling mistakes, lots of exclamation marks. It was very unprofessional. It looked poor. So we worked with them to create a software platform that allows them to create a branded Carlsberg post that's customizable so they can promote live sport, live events, music. And the uptake of that was phenomenal. And that was bars proactively going onto that platform and creating those materials themselves. And that was just a great insight from Carlsberg, because it was all about helping their bars drive footfall.
Right.
Really supporting their account. And then obviously that benefits them because they sell more beer in that account, which I think was a great example.
Right. Fascinating.
I'd add one thing, since you did say marketing and I talked about sales. Probably the most underutilized tool from where I sit, working with the customers and the suppliers and distributors, is email marketing. Now, there's a tremendous amount of that to consumers. Every brand has built up an email list, and they're using some form of tool. Where I see on the trade side, trade marketing, done a lot of trainings, spent a lot of time on the road, where we're not asking for the bartender and mixologist's email address, or sending them that great PDF of recipes that we just presented. I think there could be so much more done around email marketing. And so I think that there are tremendous tools out there that run on lots of platforms that are, as I was saying before with Slack, can be one-click integrated to other tools, and that are great about building messaging and tracking behavior. You can actually see as they're, not only where they're clicking, obviously, but there's a tremendous amount of metrics you can get today that you couldn't get 10 years ago with email marketing. So.
Yeah, I think on that marketing note, I think that what's happening with technology, which is typically how it goes, is that the granularity of information is just getting finer and finer and finer, right? So if you're running a TV campaign, you're like trying to advertise to men between 25 and 35. You now can tap into Facebook or Twitter or other social media channels and understand at a much more granular level what people are looking for, what their behaviors are, what their demographics are. And so the best marketing campaigns or the best marketers are the ones that know how to tap into that information and move from these broader messages to much more targeted micro messages. And I think how that's applied in the industry is not thinking broadly about accounts or channels or opportunities, but really thinking where are the micro opportunities that can make a really big difference. And that requires, of course, building the right intelligence engine and having a marketing team that's very savvy at understanding the kind of different levers that they can pull. But I think that's certainly the most real trend that's happening, is that the folks that will get ahead will be much more targeted in their approach. And leverage a series of different tools that are available in the market to do that. But I think the underlying theme is really just that focus and granularity that can now be tapped into.
Right.
I'd like to add that what's interesting with, and I couldn't agree with you more, what's interesting is there's industries that all they think about is advertising technology, ad tech, and they're getting more and more granular so you can spot them. And we all know about Facebook and Amazon and Netflix, how they're able to really know exactly what's going on their platforms, whereas ABC, NBC, and those guys, they really have no idea. And in the ad tech world, there's an incredible stack of companies that sit on top of each other that are between, me as, say, the advertiser and you as the consumer. And that's changing. There's probably going to be a bubble that bursts at some point. There's big competitors, little competitors. I think today's marketers, especially in the beverage alcohol world, need to be aware of this stuff. I don't know how many of you guys, 5 or so years ago were saying, I don't need to Twitter, I don't need to do this. And now there's just so many technologies. There's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It can be absolutely overwhelming, and you could probably just be throwing your money around everywhere and not hitting the right people. So being aware of these new technologies with ad tech and being able to actually sit on it and say, I'm using that, and I think it's going to pay off.
I mean, that's a good lead-in, actually, to the next question, which is, what are the things people should look out for when they're looking at different ops, software, and sites in terms of sort of moving forward their marketing strategy? What are the things they should be cautious about?
I think I can actually speak from experience on this one. With such a range of tools that are out there and feature sets that give you every kind of problem solution that you could dream up, really understanding the specific problems within your business that you're equipped to handle, given the size of your team and given your resources. It's tempting to pull the trigger on a massive suite of tools that you think are going to be your magic potion to solve your problems, but really thinking honestly about what your most important needs are and then finding the right technology that's going to accomplish that. So if you're looking at marketing tools, it's tempting to look at marketing automation that's going to give you every detail of precise data on who's looking at your website and who's interacting with your content, but really maybe all that you need is MailChimp to help you automate your marketing email campaigns. It's really about assessing the specific qualities of the tools.
I think that's a great point. Something that I caution our partners and customers to look at is transparency into operations. With some of the larger public cloud, it should be very easy to know when there are issues. A lot of us don't spend much time thinking about downtime in the cloud, but it happens, right? Amazon's had 1 or 2 outages this year, and Google's had 1 or 2. And so, when you're running on these public clouds, I think it's good to have that sort of instant transparency into uptime issues, known issues that may or may not be affecting your users. So that's getting a little techie, but I think it's important.
No, I think that's a great point.
I think one of the keys more than anything is the best tools are the ones that get used. And so the usability, the ease of training, the way it fits into your workflow, whatever that is, and that's why something like MailChimp is so great, super intuitive, it's fast, you know how to use it right away. Those tools tend to be the most powerful. And I think there's a lot of issues with software where it can become very bloated, it's trying to do too much, and that impacts the end user experience in a way where it ends up sitting on the shelf and collecting proverbial dust. And so, the key thing is really thinking through the usability. If I'm someone that's making a buying decision, do I imagine using this every day or imagine my team using this every day? Do I believe that there's training and support that can, drive the usage? I can call if I need help. Those types of things in really thinking through the adoption, I think are really, really, really critical when making a software purchase because that's what will come back to bite you. I think the second thing, which is kind of related but a little bit different, is how do you get out of it? Any tool, you have to have some sort of exit strategy. Will you be able to get your data out? What does that look like? Is there a penalty for canceling a contract? Very tactical things, but important because at the end of the day, if you're using, if you're buying some software to power a workflow or power, some activity that you're doing, you probably have fairly important information in there. And it's probably pretty important for you to think about the security of that information, your ability to get it out, should you choose to go in a different direction later. And I think that's something that's often overlooked in a software buying process is it's really easy to get excited about the entry and you're not really thinking about the exit. And, I think all of us being software companies never want to, coach our customers on how to exit because we never want them to exit the product.
It's difficult,
let's
isn't
talk
that
about
what
the
you
divorce.
said? It's very difficult.
Right.
But, it's as a buyer, it's something that I think you have to think a lot about, right? I know when we're looking for tools at GoSpotCheck, right, we're thinking about that, right? If we commit to this tool, what will it look like to reverse the decision at some point?
I mean, the security point is an interesting one, though, too, in terms of getting out. How do you vet that as a small company? How do you vet, how secure the tool that you're using is? Is there any way to vet it?
Yeah, I think each company can spin security a lot of different ways.
Right.
In a past life, I had a credit card processing app that was running on a public cloud, and the issue of PCI compliance was out there, and there were 5 ways to explain that, to give that answer when people ask. So I think that any good company, you should be able to get conversations, to get your IT organization or your analysts on the phone with or in person with, back office operations to kind of talk through what their approach is to security. If it's just a white paper or a 1-page sell sheet, then
you should worry.
Yeah, you should worry.
Yeah, I think
This is a great question because a lot of people aren't thinking security. So everyone should be aware of that. No system is perfectly secure. The NSA gets hacked, states get hacked. As an industry, we don't really have many trade secrets. Once you register with the TTB, if you're going to make a flavored whatever, it's out there. Unless you have some real enemies that want to come in. I think what people are afraid of is their data getting manipulated, changed without knowing it, or lost. If you're dealing with a company that you actually have a relationship with, you could ask for what used to be called a SAS-70 or a SOC 1, SOC 2 report. These are reports that companies that take on some sort of risk, let's say is managing your data, will provide this sort of report. Especially if you're a publicly traded company, you have to give this out to your auditors, and that will tell you actually where they house their cloud systems. Usually, it's on Amazon or one of these known cloud providers. They'll let you know what their risks are. They'll let you know more about this, what sort of encryption they use, this and that. But even the best ones, mistakes happen. I had an online backup that was saying it was being backed up, and lo and behold, it really wasn't. And they were surprised, and when I was on the phone with them, and I'm a professional, I was asking these questions, when I was on the phone with them, I heard someone say, oh, wow, this has never happened before. So it happens, you know, and there's a certain amount of risk you take. Though I think as an industry, you know, it's not too critical, you know, usually most companies will back up their data. So if you guys are out of data for a day or two, it's probably not the worst thing in the world.
So I'm going to switch gears just to give us enough time to talk about sales execution and also what might be out there in terms of the future. You know, what information should suppliers be striving to collect regarding sales execution and why? And what can companies do to really help themselves in that area?
Yeah, our product's great for that because we're capturing a lot of information in the on-premise trade. A lot of information around what products are being listed on beverage menus and what prices they're being listed at. And that's something that suppliers keep saying to us that they can't access that data, particularly in the on-trade in accounts where they don't have any electronic point of sale. So they're not capturing any sales data. That's not getting fed back into anywhere. And there's no data companies like Nielsen that are going down to that level for small, independent, on-premise accounts. So we've been speaking to a number of suppliers about presenting this data that's coming through wholesalers and then through the on-premise accounts. And they're really interested to see trends about what products are popular in which areas, what pricing, and spotting trends. So we work with a wholesaler in the UK who uses London as their insight area, and they take trends from London and actually apply those to other cities where those trends haven't started yet. So they're always ahead of the curve, and they can help educate their customers about what's coming next and what they think is going to be hot, which is a really clever way to help your customers.
I'll jump in before Matt beats me to it. I think you should collect the data that you're going to use and report on.
Right.
Too many times we see organizations design these data collection practices, I won't use the word survey, but where they're asking so much information. And you know, is your business intelligence team, your sales operations team, or even your sales leadership, are they using, or marketing, are they using that to drive their strategy? You know, really be very tactical about the data that you collect.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think, you know, some of the low-hanging fruit, right, is thinking about how we connect sales to marketing. And if you think specifically about trade promotion, starting there is a great starting point, right? Because we're talking about a lot on the line typically, and typically a lot of dollars at stake. And I think if we go back and we were talking about marketing trends, you know, measuring the performance of any marketing activity is key. What's the ROI? What's working? And in this industry, you know, the last 10 feet are often the most important for making these campaigns pay off. So I think first starting with kind of the biggest rocks that fill the jar, and that typically looks like display execution. As being kind of the biggest missing piece. And I'd say starting there, right, with any data capture strategy, you want to kind of go through a crawl, walk, run methodology, right? And if you start collecting everything, you've kind of messed up because you don't really know what the signal is, right? If you start in a very pointed way, which is exactly to Jim's point here, that's going to get you off on the right foot. And you can begin to measure, okay, what are the true drivers here? What actually makes a difference? How effective are we at executing the things that we've intended to do? And from there, you know, you want to create action plans and make sure you're measuring improvement. But for me, I think that's where the biggest bang for the buck is in the short term.
Yeah, I think from a tactical perspective, something that everybody should be thinking about using at this point, this day and age, is a CRM solution of some sort. And really beginning to think about your sales process as a cycle where you're constantly attracting new customers and kind of bringing them through a funnel of nurturing them, bringing them samples, touching them, learning about their specific tastes and interests. Once the sale goes through, thinking about how do you bring them back to the top and start exposing them to new products. And so being able to really capture that data along the process, I think, is invaluable for a company of any size.
It's interesting. I've seen a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to collect specific data, but then when you look at it in terms of the sales organization being able to use that effectively to execute something locally, it's almost like it doesn't make it there. You know, what data do you, or what technologies do you see that really help the sales team when they're trying to actually execute the sale in the account?
I would say segmentation and what we call objectives, Matt calls missions, very similar. For us, back to my point earlier about selling the right product to the right account, so you got to know what the account is, and the easiest way is sort of do these broad generalizations around, are these strategic high-end accounts? Are these casual beer bars? Because your strategy is going to be very different at each of those. And so we think of those as being sort of joined at the hip, that your objectives are either driven by the sales team or sales leadership, they're brand-based, and they're tied to different segments. So the way you're going to execute that cocktail menu placement or that wine by the glass, it's going to be a different strategy, a different pitch, maybe different content, maybe an entirely different program, depending on what type of segment the account is. So.
Right.
I think that's absolutely right. I think Aaron also hinted at this earlier, is that there's a lot that's just lost in translation or communication when it comes to making it to the front lines, right? That's often the biggest issue. I don't think there's ever any bad intent. It's just that it wasn't totally clear on what to do at which account at which time. Mm-hmm. And the more that you can be very focused and granular, and here are the critical activities, over this period for these items at these accounts, I think the easier it is to get that executed on the front line. And I think more importantly, once you have that type of communication and tracking ability, you can measure whether or not it's happening. And if it's not happening, the simple question is, why isn't it happening? Was it the wrong strategy? And those are the right discussions to be having, not spending all your time fretting about whether or not something was executed, because that's not really all that productive. Having objective results into execution is very productive, because then you can get back to the strategy, right? What do we need to be doing more of? What do we need to be doing less of? So I think just that focus on communication, clarity, transparency around objectives and things that need to get done makes most of the difference in terms of getting the front lines to really execute in the right direction.
Don't forget about dollars too. On the sales side, they know about dollars. If these accounts make the most money, you want to relay that to them. So dollars are very important. How much money making per case, all that stuff goes into all these systems. Because at the end of the day, that's why all these companies are here, right?
You must have reported to a CFO at one point.
Supposed to make revenue? I guess moving on, because I want to make sure we leave just a few minutes too for questions. We've covered different solutions currently available for smaller companies, but what are your thoughts on what the future holds? What trends are you seeing happening in tech in the industry, and also what big holes do you see out there that could be filled in the future by a tech solution? It's a wide open question, but would love your take.
Yeah, I've got a bit of an insight into this in terms of what we've seen in other markets. And as I said earlier, e-commerce and creating a marketplace like SevenFifty are doing, I think, is the future. Because as a retailer or a restaurant, you want to be able to see the full market, all the products that are available from every distributor. And I think we've seen this in the retail trade already. Consumers are becoming more educated about products. So you're finding out about the product, and then you might go into the store to actually look at it and physically touch it, check that it meets your specifications, and then you might actually buy it online. And I think we'll see that more now that product information is more widely available and easy to find on websites like SevenFifty. The consumers, the bars, restaurants are going to be more educated about what they want. And then they're going to go to their distributors and say, I want this product. And I think that's actually going to be great for small suppliers. It's a slightly more democratic process where you can see the full inventory and you're not just getting sold what the salesperson wants to sell you.
Right.
And I think that will be have a huge impact on the industry.
Absolutely.
Tech guys love talking about the future.
Yeah.
Tech guys love talking about the future. It's like the sports for us, talking about all these little things. So I think all of us can probably see what's around the corner, maybe see what's around two corners. It's really hard to say what the future is, 5 years versus 20 years. We all know the cloud is getting cheaper. Cloud technology is getting cheaper. Mobile is ubiquitous. User design, user experience is now a thing. Apps have to be pretty, or no one wants to see them. Speed is really quick. Google ruined it for a lot of companies, that if you're not fast, people get really upset. And I think it's like 3 seconds before you give up. We've all experienced that. I spoke earlier about virtual reality, 3D printers, what Amazon's doing by having this distribution everywhere, distribution centers everywhere, and killing retail stores, and potentially retail stores being where you can see, feel, and touch, and then ordering it. Drones, all this stuff is going to somehow impact the beverage alcohol industry. It's really going to be, I think, on the marketing side. I don't think you're going to be able to get a cocktail in a bar delivered to you by drone, but maybe at the next Honda Classic, they'll have that kind of stuff. More gimmicky, but there's all these different autonomous things all coming out. that one way or another will affect probably the fabric that the industry sits on, that not so unique to the industry, but to all industries. This has happened before with horses to cars. It happened with containerization in the 1950s. It happened in the early 2000s with analog television going to digital television. So no one really knows what the right mix will be. What will be prominent, what will not be prominent, what will be a fad. Artificial intelligence was around 20 years ago, and it was a fad. Microsoft had something with that little paperclip would come out. Be like, hi, I can help you do this. Why don't you talk to me, and I'll try to pull up the answer. And now it's huge. I have a bunch of Alexas and Google Home at home. That's going to be something. So there's a lot of stuff. It's exciting. There's a lot of toys to play with. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think, talking about Alexa or Google Home, we do think a lot about, I think probably all of us think a lot about, technology should take away tasks that stop you from doing the thing that lets you add the most value to your business. And the more you can strip away and allow yourself to focus on the things that you do best, that's when technology serves its best purpose. And so looking at some of these broader trends that are happening in tech around interfaces that let you actually communicate or interact with the machines. So Slack has come up a few times, and there's been a lot of conversation about bots, where with a couple text commands you can automate entire processes. I think that's a really interesting thing that will begin to take hold. Also, different voice interfaces. So speaking of Alexa and Google Home, being able to be in a car, receiving an order, and interacting with your CRM or your sales automation tool verbally. I think these things are all on the horizon and will be here sooner than we think.
I think something I've been excited about for years is starting to roll out is gamification. So the idea of, badges and challenges and points and things that drive incentives. As the younger generation takes the role of sales rep in this industry, the idea of tying sales execution to sort of a game model. But the thing that I think is more exciting to add on to the artificial intelligence topic is predictive analytics. So, leveraging all this big data that we're collecting to really understand and suggest certain placements of products or certain sales activities, not relying necessarily on a sales manager to have to crunch all this data and decide to sell, a red Italian wine between $8 and $10 at this segmented account. You can start to look at technology to suggest these things, just in the same way Netflix suggests a movie to you, right? So predictive analytics is something I know is big in the retail space. I think it will impact this industry in some way. We've talked to wholesalers about it, and it's on people's minds. So.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. The one I'm certainly most excited about is definitely machine learning and artificial intelligence. And Andre, you're absolutely right about Clippy.
Yeah.
Which was great. But I think that the reality is with the power of cloud computing and the availability of data, it's becoming much more accessible. And I think it's always been kind of a sci-fi thing, machine learning, artificial intelligence. I think it'll get pretty real over the next 5 or 10 years in a way where there's actually real applicability of the technology kind of in a day-to-day business world. And what exactly that'll look like, probably predictive, more suggestions. Humans still have to make the decisions, right? We still have to be creative and develop strategies, and exactly to Aaron's point, that's the things that we should be doing. So leaning on the proverbial machines to do more of the crunching and suggesting of different things, I think is absolutely where the technology is going. And I think we'll see that impact a lot. I think what it'll help with is innovation cycle times will only get shorter.
Right.
We'll bring products to market much faster. We'll be more diverse, so probably more unexpected opportunities that pop up. But I think that's really, for me, of all the different things that are happening in the technology space, 5 or 10 years, I think that'll be very, very dominant.
Can you imagine coming home and you have these wearables that can sense your blood pressure and your heart rate and all this, and they can say, wow, you're really stressed out. We think you would like it dark and stormy. People like you also like this. I mean, it's probably around the corner.
I do wonder with the predictability whether or not your world becomes actually quite small, though, because you become so utterly predictable that your exposure to new ideas and new concepts becomes limiting, right? Which I think they talked about a lot recently as far as news.
Yeah.
But it does make me think about sort of our product base, too. Will you see that over time as predictability rolls into sort of technology that we interface with and experience?
Well, part of the human experience is making choices,
Right.
making decisions. So you have a lot of different things telling you what you should do. You have Google, you have Yahoo, or kind of had Yahoo. You have all these different search engines, and you'll pick one, but you still have the choice to pick other ones. So there'll always be that choice. You'll never just be a droid and just walk through life.
Hopefully.
That's for sure.
Well, and I actually think like if you look at Amazon, right, suggested products, like that's how it'll work right there, right? And I think done right, it actually increases that type of serendipity,
Right.
right, because it knows the type of things that you will like.
Right.
So that's what I'm kind of excited about.
It's fascinating. So I want to make sure we have enough time to just open it up for some questions. And I think we have somebody wandering around who can answer questions, or pass the mic, I should
We
say.
need to collaborate on a quirky.
Hi.
Down
Hi,
at
I
the
think
bottom
I'm
of the
on.
screen.
This is Sherry J. Hill with Concentric Productions Inc. To your point about technology allowing you to do the things that you do best, I have an in-store demo company, and a good portion of my staff's energy is spent gathering data that sometimes I don't know how accurate it is, because if we're actually doing our job to sell, we're not effectively gathering that data. So I love technology. I created a CRM. I can staff, recruit, train staff, and activate people all over the country. But I didn't hear anyone here talk about beacons or proximity marketing. I would love for that to become more prevalent, because it would allow my staff to not have to handle coupons, to have data pushed in both directions to help us both gather data and also to be more effective. We can shoot a coupon at the front door, those types of technology. I didn't hear that mentioned. Could you speak to that?
Interesting.
I've been waiting like 10 years for my phone to start telling me that there's something nearby that it knows is aligned with my interests. I've now got Starbucks popping up on my phone every day, alerting me about products, but it's not necessarily driving me to a retail location. I would imagine some of this concern, I've talked to some companies doing the couponing. I know it's very difficult to bring that digital couponing to market in alcohol, so that's a huge challenge. But I think retail or proximity marketing, as you're talking about, is fascinating. We have the data. We know where everyone is. I know grocery and retail is using it in a big way to track how you walk through the store and what aisles are going down. That's where I'm seeing it, kind of the rubber hits the road right now.
Yeah.
Not,
Yeah, I think it's bound to happen. I think there's still one data layer that we're missing, specifically around alcohol retail, and that's inside of independent retail, really understanding what inventory exists, in-house at any given time. And we're moving to a place where that should be available over the next few years. But I think as soon as that's in place, then these types of things can be built on it, more quickly.
I think that's a great
I think
point.
actually beacons are going to be replaced with video technology. I think the beacons require hardware, requires your phone to talk to it. Beacons freak people out. You're tracking me. Video cameras also freak people out, but a lot of places will have video cameras that can kind of see what's going on. And if you come in a lot, they can say, oh, you're number whatever, 36, and you do this, and where you walk around. And I think they'd be cheaper and easier to implement.
Wi-Fi routers as well.
Yeah.
The combination of those.
And then I think at some point that will get replaced with something else. It's going to be a constant innovation. But Jim said it best. He's been waiting 10 years for beacons to do this. I think in China they do a lot of stuff with beacons at big events. You see it every now and then here.
Interesting. Anybody else? Should we?
You just throw the microphone.
Yeah, unless you have a very loud voice.
Oh.
Hi, my name's Suzanne Kendrick. I'm from Wine Searcher, and I heard you say at the beginning that big data is a thing for the trade, and we now have a big data product. But I'm interested in where the other big data sources are, because we only ever hear about Nielsen, and Nielsen is super expensive, and for the very very big companies. So, where is this big data coming from, and what are people using besides Nielsen that are in the trade?
Danny Brager's not still in the room, is he? From Nielsen. That's a good question. So we see customers, I mean, the big drive is to capture the on-premise version of Nielsen Scan, which we understand is in the works. Guessometrics took a stab at that, swipe with credit card data. That's pretty fascinating. We're starting to see some overlays around consumer data. It's not really touching us because our product doesn't help market to consumers or track consumer behavior. So you might have a better insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think touching on-premise, that's still a big black box. You know, we are collecting a certain data set, but it's more around trade interests and trends as opposed to the actual placements inside of retail at this point. Yeah, I think it's still unclear where the master data set of the full-on off-premise depletion data is gonna live.
I do think Nielsen has been expanding their offering, and I know that they're pushing pretty hard in that in terms of having some analytics on-premise, and I think there's a few other people too. I think one of the challenges that's there is there's nobody who has the perfect data set, right? Which, obviously this goes back to you want big data, but you want the big data to be right, and you want it to be 100% of what you need to look at. But it's a little more of an art versus a science right now, I would say.
I think a startup in the big data space is kind of an oxymoron because, I mean, like Wine Searcher is a good example. They've been around forever, right? So they've amassed all this information. So while I think it's attractive to get into that space, gathering that data, particularly with humans, I know that was something you guys started early on with, it's challenging. It really is. And to your point earlier, do you know if it's accurate?
So one of the biggest roadblocks to having, I guess, perfect big data or a real competitor to Nielsen is the regulations. We're in 3 tiers. Distributors are not there because they're innovative and that it makes sense. A lot of suppliers would like to go directly to retail. Then they would know a lot more. So it's just, gathering all that data at all those different levels, and every market's different, and all these regulations that make it so complicated. Amazon tried selling alcohol online, I think, in one of the Western markets. I forget which one it was. And they were doing it illegally or something stupid. But they would have been able to know everything that's going on. So as soon as you get so-called perfect data where you know every single depletion down to the case, then you want to know when was it bought, who bought it, how did they buy it, cash or credit, were they with other people? The data will just keep growing and growing. Were the people good looking? Were the people, what kind of clothes were they wearing? And then people, marketers in 15 years could be making decisions on, we really want to target people who wear jeans. How do you collect that data? Oh, well, we're collecting it from this company. We're nowhere near there, but,
I do think it's a challenge just because of independent markets, and actually data is a competitive advantage. I think we see that across the board too. So, I don't know that you'll ever have that perfect picture of how things go because it is a competitive advantage, and it definitely is for independent retailers, I think too, in terms of their own business and what they want to share. So it's interesting to see where that'll go though. So I think that's it as far as questions, and I think we're actually running a little bit over on our end, unless somebody has a burning last question. Nope. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.